Greetings, friends, fellow patriots, and fellow citizens, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention Weekly News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm also the president of the We the People Convention organization. This podcast and our text messages and our emails and our wonderful website and our donations to other conservative groups and causes are all paid for by the generous donations of our donors to the We the People Convention. And we thank them for their 17 years of support to this organization. And we ask, if you have the means to do so, that you go to wethepeopleconvention.org and join them as we enter a pivotal year this year, 2026, which we like to say is the year that we win the war, that we finally defeat the communist left in the United States in this fall's elections. And we have lots to do in order to get that done. So welcome to all of you. We're glad you're decided to join us. If you're new to the podcast, what you're going to see is a compilation of the news of the week that we think affects your and my and our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. That's what we're about, defending our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity against what? Socialism, communism, statism that wants to enslave us and take away our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So welcome to all of you who are new to the podcast. Thanks to all of you who've been longtime supporters. We appreciate you so very, very much. We've got a lot to get into this podcast, so I'm not going to, I'm going to get right after it because, the war is obviously the top story, and we need to get to that right away. So Trump says there are negotiations ongoing with Iran, and, that was first, questioned, right? Iran said, we're not talking to him. And then, they came back and said, well, yeah, here's our counter demands. And there is something going on. So that's good news. Now, what is really going on is important to get into. All right. U.S. President Donald Trump claimed Tuesday that his administration was talking to the right people in Iran, adding that the Islamic Republic wants to make a deal so badly to end the ongoing war. We're in negotiations right now. We have a number of people doing it, Trump told reporters, referring to his negotiators, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance. Well, after that, the radicals in Iran said, they said we're not negotiating, and then they basically came back with their own terms. Despite talks of diplomacy, the Pentagon is acting, just as if there is no diplomacy going on. They're conducting diplomacy by war, and that's the right thing to do. Until there's a deal, there's not a deal. So that's important. There's also some reluctance by Israel and even the Arab nations, as you'll hear here, saying that they don't want Trump to stop until the Iranian regime is vanquished. They do not want to go back to the tyranny of the Iranian, Muslim clerics who were dominating the region. And so Israel's kind of saying, pump the brakes a little bit. We'll see what happens. But it is interesting that there's some pushback. So what is Trump asking for? What are his 15 points? Iran must dismantle its existing nuclear capabilities. Iran must commit never to pursue nuclear weapons. There will be no uranium enrichment on Iranian territory. Iran must hand its stockpile of 400 kilograms of uranium over to the U.S. to the International Atomic Energy Agency. The nuclear facilities that they've got must be dismantled. The IAEA and the UN's nuclear watchdog must be granted full access to oversee what's going on in Iran at any time. It must abandon its regional proxy program of funding Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the rest of the terrorist groups that they've been using in Lebanon and in Gaza, to attack Israel. Those are kind of the main things, but the big one is the Straits of Hormuz must remain open and function as a free maritime corridor. All right. Well, that's just hitting at the heart of Iran's financial capability to do what? To fund their war efforts, right? So they come back and go, no. We want full reparations. We want you to pay us for the damage you've done. We want to have a toll on the Straits of Hormuz, even though Iran's on one side and the UAE and other Arab nations are on the other side. They want to have a toll booth of like $2 million per tanker that goes through that gets paid to the Iranian government. Okay, they want basically to redo what they've been doing, and it's just a non-starter. Trump can't agree to that. They know that, and so it's going to have to keep going. Despite that, Trump had threatened last week, right after this podcast, that within 48 hours, if they don't open the Straits of Hormuz, Trump was going to take out their electrical capacity, including their nuclear power plants. And that would have been crippling to Iran as a country and to their people. He said that if you don't, come to open the Straits of Hormuz, we're going to do this. Well, then the Iranians came back and said, well, we want to talk, we want to negotiate. So he gave them a 5-day extension till Friday, which was yesterday. Today's March 28th, Saturday, last Saturday of March 2026. And he had given him a 5-day deadline. And then he said, the negotiations are going so well, we're going to extend it 10 more days. So there is talk going on, but are they substantive? I don't know. I mean, can you trust the Iranians? No, you can't. So, force still has to be done, right? And that's, why, Trump he's negotiating, but it really, it's a matter of forcing them to give concessions that they don't want to give. So what does that mean? The Pentagon says they're prepping for a massive final blow versus Iran, seizing strategic islands as U.S. wastes sending 10,000 combat troops, into the fight. Okay. Now, most of us don't want to see boots on the ground. Now you're splitting hairs because you're saying, well, we don't want boots on the ground in Iran proper, but Karg Island and these other islands near the Straits of Hormuz, that may be a different story. It's gonna play out however it plays out. It's really clear. The Pentagon understands what they got to do, and they're going to do it. And Trump understands what he's got to do, and he's going to do it, whether it's popular or not, because we're in this to win this. And I think all the actions that Trump has taken so far are showing that. President Donald Trump's Pentagon is developing military options for what officials describe as a potentially massive final blow against Iran, including seizing strategic islands in the Straits of Hormuz, blockading Iranian oil exports, and securing Tehran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, as the administration weighs sending 10,000 additional combat troops to the Middle East if diplomacy collapses and the vital water rate remains restricted. Axios first reported on Thursday that the Pentagon is drawing up escalation options for the White House to consider. They, and again, I said, they're thinking about Karg Island is this island where the Iranians have like these undersea oil lines coming into that, and they then load all the ships that they send their oil and to mostly China and to Japan and Vietnam and other places. And so if we cut that off, like 90% of their revenue would be shut off. Can we cut that off? You don't want to destroy it, because then you're basically destroying the ability for the country of Iran to get back on its feet after the war. And so do you blockade it? Who knows what's going to happen there, but that's certainly, in the mix. And so we knew that there were Marines being sent, and now the Pentagon is deploying the 82nd Airborne to the Middle East, and that is Army. The Pentagon is expected to send a combat team for the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East, according to multiple reports. The elite 82nd Airborne Division is known for its rapid deployment and secures key objectives for follow-on military operations in support of national interests. The move follows the deployment last week of thousands of Marines and sailors aboard the USS Boxer, an amphibious assault ship, along with the Marine Expeditionary Unit and accompanying warships. The expected deployments come just a day after President Trump postponed threats to bomb Iran's nuclear plant. So again, carrot and stick, carrot and stick. He's showing we mean business by moving these forces into position, and he's trying to bring them to the negotiating table. One of the things that I did want to talk about is that this asymmetric warfare thing, where now the Iranians are using speedboats to go after to block the Straits of Hormuz and only allow ships they want to allow through. Okay, and these are they're like boats you might own. Okay, they're not warships. All right, and the problem was, as we've talked before, everyone's saying we're going to run out of missiles. We're spending $3 million to blow up a $10,000 drone, and I showed you how we have ways to do that don't cost millions of dollars. But the big story this week is the A-10 Warthog. I'm showing a picture of the A-10 Warthog, which is a legendary U.S. military aircraft that's being deployed, and why it makes a difference. And I've been posting these things from this guy, Alexander Muse, M-U-S-E, and you can follow him on Substack or on X. But he had this lengthy story about this, and he says basically that we were using these SM-6 interceptors that cost $5.3 million, and Harpoon missiles, which cost $1.5 million to blow up these speedboats. But the A-10 Warthog just changes the whole thing. And, the Warthog is built around the GAU-8A Avenger cannon, a 7-barrel Gatling system that fires 30-millimeter depleted uranium rounds at 3,900 rounds per minute. That's like nuts. Or 65 rounds per second, okay? So the aircraft carries 1,150 rounds in a drum the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, and a standard 2-second burst puts approximately 130 rounds downrange against a target. A fiberglass fast boat with no armor just gets blown to hell by that. The engagement math against that target runs to around $10,000 compared to these $5 million missiles. And so now you're spending $10,000 to blow up a $10,000 boat. Okay? I just wanted to bring that to your attention because the critics keep acting like we're stupid. Okay, and we're not stupid. And only we can bring the various levels of technology to fight and win this war. We're going to open the Straits of Hormuz. I talked to you about that last week. The Marines and the 82nd Airborne, they're going to take over the land around the Straits of Hormuz and make sure there's no capability for the Iranians to stop shipping. It's just a matter of time. And then this story is really an important story. Gulf states edge towards joining the fight in Iran, against Iran, okay? This is a big deal because they're not just for the United States now. As I said, they're encouraging, the Saudis particularly, are encouraging Trump to finish the job, okay? But now they're starting to step up. U.S. allies in the Persian Gulf are inching toward joining the fight against Iran let's see here, getting tougher following persistent attacks that have disrupted their economies and risk giving Tehran long-term leverage over the Straits of Hormuz. The recent steps support America's ability to carry out airstrikes and open up a new line of attack on Tehran's finances. They don't yet go as far as deploying their militaries openly in the fight, a line the Gulf rulers have hoped not to cross, though pressure is building as Iran threatens to exert greater sway over the energy-rich region. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia is now eager to reestablish deterrence and is close to the decision to join the attack with real troops. It is only a matter of time before the kingdom enters the war, some people say. Saudi Arabia's patience with the Iranian attacks is not unlimited, Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan told reporters last week after a series of Iranian attacks on Gulf energy infrastructure. Any belief that the Gulf countries are incapable of responding is a miscalculation. The United Arab Emirates, meanwhile, is starting to crack down on Iranian-owned assets because a lot of the mullahs and a lot of the generals in Iran had their money out of the country, all right? Their billions of dollars they steal. And they're threatening a key lifeline to the rulers of Tehran while it debates whether to send its military into the fight and lobbies against a ceasefire that leaves some of Iran's military capabilities intact. So our coalition is growing, Okay, it's growing, and that's a good sign that this war is going to end, and we're going to be victorious. And this is just Israel has been systemic. They've just been so focused on taking out the Iranian leadership. Iran's elite Navy chief, responsible for closing the Straits of Hormuz, is killed in an airstrike. Well, don't you know? Let's see here. Ali Zara Tangsiri, leader of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Navy, was eliminated in an overnight strike on the fleet's home port of Bandar Abbas, Defense Minister Sir Israel Katz said during a morning assessment alongside military officials. Tangsiri, 64, became the latest high-profile Iranian official to have been rubbed out after the assassination earlier this month of the rest of the regime. So the guy that's running their Navy and saying, hey, we're going to block the straits, he's dead now. Okay? He's dead now. And the Israelis are not fooling around, and neither is the United States. We're at like 9,000 targets hit already. Okay? But this is something, again, I didn't pick up on. And if you pull out your Google map or whatever on your computer, or if you have an old globe, that would be interesting. Some of you probably do. Israel targets Russian-Iranian weapons supply line in the Caspian Sea. Now, this, I said Caspian Sea. I know where the Black Sea is, because that's kind of tied to Ukraine and Russian Navy, stuff like that. But the Caspian Sea is actually north of Iran, and Russia is sending drones and weapons and supplies to the Iranians over the Caspian Sea. And what does Israel do? They go in there and just blow it all to hell. We're cutting them off. There's only so much you can do when you don't have any money, you don't have any fuel, you don't have any weapons. And we're degrading that across the board. But they're not just, they're not just sitting back and saying, we're not going to do anything. The mullahs, these are radicals. These are people who want to die, right? They're people who strap a bomb to their chest and go blow up, infidels in a market. So, they're just going to do anything they can do. So I was waiting for this to drop, and I thought it was interesting. Iran threatens to close the Red Sea if the U.S. invades. The Red Sea. So you got Iran, you got the Caspian Sea up here, you've got the Gulf of Oman and the Hormuz Straits underneath it. Then you've got Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Yemen, and then you got the Red Sea that goes, to Egypt, which is a major waterway. Well, the Houthis were launching missiles into the Red Sea during the Biden administration, and Biden did nothing. Trump comes into office, bam, the Houthis just go, whoa, we're sorry, we're not doing that anymore. They haven't fired a missile, since Trump came to office. All right, so they've been sitting out, but are they going to stay out of it? That's kind of the question. So, the Iranians, trying to, cause more concern and make, the oil markets go up higher. Iranian state media outlet Tazim news agency, citing a military source, indicated that Tehran was preparing to close the Bab el-Mandeb, a critical waterway linking the Red Sea to the Arabian Sea, in the event of a U.S. ground operation. If the enemy wants to take action on the land in Iran and Iranian islands or anywhere else in our lands, or to inflict costs on Iran with naval movements in the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman, we will open other fronts for them as well as a surprise, so that their action will not only be of no benefit to them, but will also double their costs. The Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen, which control much of the shoreline adjacent to the strait, has previously closed the waterway to maritime traffic by attacking commercial shipping. U.S. forces struck the Houthis last year, resulting in an agreement with the group to cease their targeting of American vessels. Thus far, the Houthis have been mostly stayed out of the current conflict. Yeah, I don't think they're going to come in. They're very vulnerable. Their land where the Houthis are is like desert, and it's not like Iran with the mountains and stuff. They'd be just wiped out. So, but that's, the give and take. You need to know that could be an escalation, right? That could be an escalation. This was really important. And you probably, the stuff is moving so fast, and I'm trying to connect, a lot of dots, okay, for you, because it is important to see the mosaic of what's going on. This was really important. Iran's strike at Diego Garcia will ring alarm bells across Europe. The Iranians made a tactical error. I'll show you on the screen here for those of you who are watching. This is a map of the Middle East, okay? And you can see the circles where Iran is there. And all of a sudden, these rings reach up to Berlin and Rome and Vienna. And now they're saying, basically, Trump said, we had to go after Iran because they were close to developing a nuclear weapon and they were close to developing long-range missiles that could hit the United States, but certainly could hit our bases all over Europe. Guess what? He was right. They ridiculed him. Oh, Trump's just making that up. It's all bullcrap. And then the Iranians provided the evidence. Iran's reported ballistic missile attack on Diego Garcia military base deep in the Indian Ocean has rang alarm bells across the West. The Kormasara 4, a 20-ton rocket that can carry 80 cluster munitions, is thought to have been the weapon fired at the joint UK-US base in the Congo Islands. Now, this is this base that's been under conflict between Britain and U.S. because the damn UK was going to turn it over to these indigenous people who claim it, okay? And Trump's going, whoa. That's a strategic base to help us keep China in check. So you may remember that's the islands we're talking about, way out in the Indian Ocean. Well, defense analysis told the Telegraph that the attempted strike on a base more than 2,400 miles away could put continental Europe and possibly even Britain under the threat from Iranian ballistic missiles. London, Paris, Berlin, and every other European capital now lies within credible Iranian reach, said Brigadier General Ran Kovac, a former Rusi research fellow and ex-commander of the Israeli air and military force. Most experts think that this missile has a maximum range of 1,900 miles. That would put it in range of the United Kingdom and other military bases in southern Eastern Europe, including Cyprus, Greece, Turkey, the Balkans, and perhaps even Italy, Austria, and Germany. So what happened? As soon as they did that, all the NATO countries were like, whoa, we're in. We got to stop this. We got to stop this regime. And so Britain is talking with the U.S. about them leading the international naval convoy that would start escorting these tankers through the Straits of Hormuz once the U.S. secures them. And again, so we got the Arab nations coming in. Now we have the European nations coming in. We got Japan coming in, Australia, and so it's important. Okay, that you see that we're not just unilateral in this. It's not just us and Israel. It's global because this was a global threat. And we're going to be better off for it. I know that's what everybody keeps telling you, but we're going to be better off for it in the long run. Okay? Now, again, this thing it's a war. So things happen. This was very interesting. DOJ confirms breach of FBI director's personal emails after Iran-linked group claims hack. This is Kash Patel's personal Gmail account from, I think it's 2010 to 2019, was just hacked into by some Iranian secret, agency, and they started to publish his emails, including a resume and some photographs and things like that. And basically the DOJ had to confirm that it looks like that's true. They were able to do that. And it's good that it's not current stuff that the FBI director is doing, but it still should cause concern, right? We're not totally invulnerable. We're fighting this war with as little damage as possible as far as loss of troops and materials and things like that. But they're still fighting us. And you got to be aware that that's going to happen. Now, again, what's really important for us is that because Trump, in his first term, did two things. He rebuilt the military and he drilled, baby drill. He made us energy independent. That is really working in our favor. The rest of the world is dying because of this. And that's a good thing because now they need to realize they got skin in the game. They got to get involved. So that's a good thing. But here's another example. U.S. liquefied natural gas poised to fill gap after Qatar plant damage. So the Iranians fired missiles at this liquefied natural gas facility in Qatar, and now Europe prices are going out of control, but American prices are not. U.S. Gulf Coast LNG export plants were poised to increase shipments in global markets, desperate for gas supplies, as damage assessments show a year or longer will be needed to repair Qatar's giant LNG production facility located along the Persian Gulf. Iranian missile strikes late Wednesday caused extensive damage to the Ras Laffan industry city, the world's largest LNG export hub, capable of loading several supersized tankers simultaneously and processing over 77 million tons of gas annually. The disruption has wiped out approximately 17% of Qatar's LNG capacity, leading to forced suspensions on long-term contracts to Italy, Belgium, South Korea, and China. Qatar's officials estimate LNG production units with 12.8 million tons of annual capacity were expected to come online in 26. Instead, will take 3 to 5 years to repair. So that's a big deal. When LNG buyers can't get the gas from their original source, they take it from whoever might have it available. And right now, that's basically the U.S. and Australia, said Eric Smith, Associate Director of Tulane Energy Institute. Smith notes that hundreds of ships, including many LNG vessels, are currently trapped in the Persian Gulf north of the Straits of Hormuz, preventing them from delivering their cargoes, further complicating the LNG markets. Since the conflict began at the end of February, prices of benchmark European natural gas have risen approximately 72%. All right? But U.S. Henry Hub natural gas futures for delivery April settled Friday at $3 per million BTUs. And the LNG plants in Texas and Louisiana already account for about 25% of all global export capacity, and these production at these facilities in the months ahead are expected to rise. So, again, we're filling the gap. And while gas prices, automobile gas and diesel are like double in Europe, here they're up, but they're still below, in most of the United States, below $4 a gallon. And that's still lower than they were when Biden was president, when they reached $5 a gallon. So why? Because we got our own resources. So I hope that helps you kind of get a look at the war. It's, there's still more military action to come. Marco Rubio told the G7 leaders this week, 2 to 4 more weeks. There's probably going to be U.S. troops involved, whether it's Karg Island, these other islands. It's real clear. Not only can Iran not have nuclear weapons, can't have long-distance missiles, they can't control the Straits of Hormuz. And that's what the Saudis and all those people are afraid of. That's what, even China is afraid of. And China, who's supposed to be the big ally, and Russia are the big allies of Iran, haven't done much to help them. And China even said that they support the Pakistanis who are negotiating between the U.S. and Israel and the Iranians. They support that. So lots going on. All in all, yes, there's some pain, but it's overblown. And if we can win this and win this in short order, man, it changes everything. You talk about gas prices going down. You talk about free flow and no threats in the Middle East and what that does to the U.S., how many of our troops we can pull out of the region and get the Saudis and the other Arab nations to join with Israel to police their own area. The upsides are huge, folks. The downside's not that big. I mean, I just hope you get that. If you don't get that, write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org and tell me your concerns. Because I just don't think the other side of the story is being told, the upside of this war. It's peace for 50 years. It's prosperity instead of war. It's us not having to keep troops stationed there to protect Israel and the oil and gas when we don't need their oil and gas anymore. We got our own. What are we doing over there? There's only one reason we're over there. Because Iran was a real threat to us. Donald Trump is removing that threat. So in the meantime, we got this going on in the United States. I'll just make mention of it because I'll show you the domestic side of it. Despicable pro-Iranian protesters in Philadelphia declare, for every U.S. soldier that comes home in a casket, we cheer. I'm not going to play you the video of these morons because they don't deserve it. Vile Philadelphia protesters cheered as a mass ringleader celebrated the death of U.S. service members in shocking new footage before calling for Hamas rockets to explode among American homes. For every U.S. soldier that returns home in a casket, we cheer, the provocateurs shouted outside Philadelphia City Hall, according to footage filmed by local conservative activist Frankie Scales. Until we have done everything in our power to bring the United States to its knees, let us not lose sight of the enemy, the man yelled at the crowd, cheering loudly at each hateful invocation. The masked hooded ringleader called on Hamas and Hezbollah resistance forces and popular forces, then called on the Iran regime to remain in power so to continue supporting the terror groups. They rely on a strong Iranian state to maintain their funding capacity, the man said. When the filmer confronted the hate monger, he said, "May a Hamas rocket blow up your family's home." U.S. Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania reposted the clip and called on his fellow Democrats to condemn the behavior. Here in Philadelphia, he said, truly appalling. These a-holes are chanting for the death of our service members, Fetterman wrote on X. Where's the Dem outrage and condemnation? There was none. There was none besides Fetterman. Why? Because the Democrats aren't Democrats. They're Marxists. Their goal is the destruction of the United States, just like Iran. The Democrats might as well chant death to America. Some of them do. Olan Ilmar and those people do. They're not the Democratic Party. They are the enemy of our people. And they're not supporting American people. They're supporting the illegal immigrants they imported intentionally to do what? To rig our elections and steal all of our money. And we're going to talk a lot more about that, particularly at the end of this podcast. I'm going to have a pretty strong statement for you, so you may want to stick around for that. So let's move on to the other big story of the day, okay, which is, the problem with the Senate not passing funding for, DHS, not passing the SAVE Act, not being willing to do a talking filibuster, not being willing to break the filibuster, not willing to do much of anything, right? Now, they did confirm Mullins, the former senator from Oklahoma, to be the new DHS secretary. So that was really rich. So they took time to confirm him, but then they're going to appoint him the head of an agency that has no funding, right? Yeah, what's that about? The Senate on March 23rd confirmed Oklahoma Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullin as the next Department of Homeland Security Secretary. The vote was 54-45. He will replace Kristi Noem, who Trump, reassigned to the special envoy to the Shields of America that we talked about, where we're going to crush the cartels in South America. Again, Trump's amazing. He's walking and chewing gum and playing 4D chess. And I know some of you guys hate that. Write to me about you don't think he's smart. You think he's dumb. He doesn't play 4D chess. Keep sending those emails to me. I love responding to you. info@WeThePeopleConvention. Mullin urged Congress to fully fund the DHS, saying it's unconscionable to let agency workers go unpaid. He suggested that Congress was playing with fire by withholding money during a conflict with Iran and apparent lone wolf terrorist attacks that have occurred in the United States. So he urged them to do something. So what did they do? Well, they, in the dead of night, 2 o'clock in the morning on this Friday, Senate passes funding for all of DHS except for ICE, okay? So this is the chicken shit way out, right? Because the Republicans don't want to defend the Republic, don't want to stop the illegal, don't want to save our elections. So they basically do this deal. Now, I was shocked. When I woke up on Friday morning, I was like, what? What did they do? And then it got worse, okay? So they passed this bill. After weeks of airport meltdowns and unpaid security agents, the Senate finally blinked. In a late-night vote that stretched into the early hours of Friday morning, lawmakers in the Senate passed a funding bill to reopen most of the Department of Homeland Security, a move aimed squarely at ending the travel nightmare and getting TSA agents paid again. The bill funds TSA, FEMA, Coast Guard, cybersecurity, and some border agents, but not ICE. However, ICE is already fully funded for 3 years because of the big, beautiful bill that passed last year, which makes this whole thing insanely stupid, right? I mean, insanely stupid by the Democrats, because the thing they're protesting, they're not having any effect on. At least we thought, okay? So I said in our story at WeThePeopleConvention.org, so in effect, the Democrats shut down the government for a second time in 6 months for nothing. They got no change on ICE, which they claimed was their goal. In the process, they made life miserable for millions of Americans traveling and for unpaid TSA and other government employees who weren't paid. Then they made it totally clear that their main constituents are not Americans, but they're illegal immigrants that they imported under Biden to use to cheat in elections, as Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said when he said, if you pass the SAVE Act, tens of millions of people will be thrown off the voter rolls. He didn't say American citizens. He said people. Yeah, illegals who vote for them illegally. And House Minority Hakeem Jeffries, who said, our biggest thing is no ICE agents at polling locations. Why is that a problem? Because you got to have illegals voting or you can't win. And if the ICE agents are there, they won't show up. Oh, guess what? You just made our case. But then the Republicans in the Senate, they don't want to accept that, right? So here's the dirty little secret. This bill they passed was a piece of garbage. And Johnson, Speaker Johnson, to his credit, shocked the heck out of me because he rejected it. Listen to this, man. This is a powerful video.
This has to stop. The Republicans are not going to be a party to this. They have taken hostage the funding processes of government so that they can impose their radical agenda on the American people, and we can't have any part of it. This gambit that was done last night is a joke. I'm quite convinced that it can't be that every Senate Republican read the language of this bill, and I'm going to just read you one excerpt of it because it's pretty alarming, and it says everything that you need to know in Section 4. This is on page 2 of the bill. This is an actual copy of the bill. That excerpt. It says, quote, "The contents printed under the headings of this bill, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Border Security Operations, under the heading of U.S. Customs and Border Patrol and Protection, shall have no force or effect for purposes of this Act, and amounts specified in the final bill under the subheading Border Security Operations and under the heading U.S. Customs and Border Protection and under the headings of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the Department of Homeland Security shall be zero." We're not doing that. And it is unconscionable to me that the Democrats would force some sort of negotiation at 3 o'clock in the morning and try to hoist this upon the American people and then get on their jets and go home for their holiday and pretend and think that we're going to go along with that.
Yeah. Zero funding, meaning open borders. No Border Patrol agents. And, Eric Swalwell, that piece of crap, right, who's trying to run, to be, senator in California, this guy goes out on Friday morning and starts crowing about, we tore up immigration protection, Border Patrol, root and branch. We fooled the Republicans, except you only fooled Thune and the rest of them who are rhinos. You didn't fool Johnson in the House. And so the House yesterday, right away, passed a short-term funding bill, 2-month CR to fund all of DHS with ICE and Border Patrol included. The vote was 213 to 203, with all the Democrats, surprise, voting not to fund it because they have to make sure that we don't deport their voters. You see, it's clear as a bell. No doubt about it. So what's the Senate going to do now? Oh, they're all on vacation. Yeah. Well, I hope those of you who see them in person, your Republican and Democrat senators in person over the vacation, over Easter, go to their events. Remember when the Tea Party first started and all the members of the House came to their districts and we were fighting Obamacare? And we went nuts on them in their town halls and scared them so bad they wouldn't hold town halls anymore. It's time for us to confront these traitors, these Republicans in name only, who are siding with the Democrats against our country, who are not going to protect your and my vote, who do not want to fix our elections, who love the fact that our treasury is being looted by their friends and donors and NGOs. Confront them. Shame them. They should be ashamed of what they did. They should be ashamed that they're gone for Easter. How dare you? How dare you? They should be ashamed. Oh yeah, by the way, do you know that Thune makes sure that during the Easter recess, that like every 2 days or whatever, they have someone come and read a couple paragraphs so they're quote in session so that Trump can't appoint any of his people to run the government. The Republicans are stopping Trump from doing recess appointments. We aren't even talking about that. How many people have talked about that? What the hell? Yeah, who's the enemy? You got to go to their events. If they're in your community, you got to show up and you got to call them out. They need to end the filibuster and they need to pass the SAVE Act. They need to pass DHS funding. We got to pass all the stuff that Trump has put out in executive order. That's what they need to do. It's scary. It's totally terrifying. So in the meantime, Trump, playing 3D chess, 4D chess, 5D chess, does a brilliant move. He sends ICE to help TSA. So when they won't fund TSA and there's all these large lines at airport, Trump sends ICE in to help with the airports. And it's just really interesting because by doing so, he accomplished two things. One, the lines went down, okay? And two, illegals stopped flying because now we're at the airports and checking on them. Trump deploys ICE agents to airports to assist TSA and freak out Democrats and illegals. But it's not the long-term answer we need. President Donald Trump said on March 22nd that he will deploy Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents to airports to help Transportation Security Administration, TSA agents, manage security checkpoints. On Monday, ICE will be going to airports to help our wonderful TSA agents, and they went to 14 airports, okay? Now, in this story, on our We the People convention website, and you should go read it, I said, he sends ICE to help TSA, he should shut it down instead. And that's a fact. TSA is worthless. It's worthless. We don't need it. It never should have been started. It was done in a panic after 9/11, and it's a total disgusting failure and waste of billions of dollars, okay? You can read the article that goes in depth and shows any test of TSA is a total failure. They did tests against TSA to like bring a gun or a bomb on a plane. 95% of the time it got through. It's a joke. It's become another government work program. And guess what? In San Francisco, they don't have the TSA. They have private security. There were no lines at San Francisco airport. Again, this is a scam on you and I. This is a theft of our taxpayer dollars. Nonetheless, Trump, is dealing with the environment that he's in, okay? And Tom Homan laid it out. Watch this video. It's great.
Trump made a brilliant move this week, and he called me and says, let's send ICE to the airport. I thought it was a smart move. And we're filling the holes. The wait lines are already dropped. Plus, we're doing a security function at the airports. We're going to arrest criminals going through this airport. We're going to look for human trafficking, sex trafficking, money smuggling. We're going to be at the airports working with our brothers and sisters of TSA. They're our brothers and sisters within DHS. President Trump made a smart move. We're going to keep the airplanes flying. We're going to get the American people to those lines quicker. And we're not going to give up President Trump's promise to American people to make this country safer every day. And that's what we're going to keep doing.
And that's what they did. And then here's the beautiful thing, because this is where Trump, again, does things that are way more meaningful than they look on the surface. So guess what? The left's about ISIS, Gestapo. These are terrible people. And it was unbelievable how they embarrassed themselves, okay? But, some of these Democratic senators are saying, they're going to shoot people in the airports. They're just going to gun down families. They look like total fools because they are total fools. They're way out over their skis. So you know what's really happening? And there's plenty of video. Yeah, there's some lefty a-holes who are, screaming at the ICE agents, calling them Gestapo. You know what there also are? There are millions of Americans going through these airports thanking ICE and seeing that these are good guys. And Trump also said no masks for the ICE agents at the airports, okay? So they could be friendlier looking. Again, he's trying to move the public perception model. And you think if you were afraid you're going to wait 4 hours in a line at the airport and now you only have to wait 40 minutes, you're not going to say, wow, President Trump did some things that are good. And those ICE guys helped out. Man, he's smart. He's really smart. Okay? So here's some other information that I thought this was really cool. You should be able to see this on your screen. It's a map, and it says, just in stunning victory, every single metro area in America saw net immigration plummet during Trump's first year in office. And it shows all these sanctuary cities that are losing people. El Paso's down 95%. Denver, minus 72%. Los Angeles, minus 67%. New York City, minus 65%. Chicago, 62%. I voted for this. Keep it going. Make 2026 another record year. This is ICE deporting them. This is Homeland Security paying them to self-deport. Okay? This is people just giving up and going home because why? We're trying to cut off their access to government programs, right? It's working, and it's going to make all those cities safer. And you don't get enough coverage of the net effect. Those are huge numbers. Those are huge numbers. And the U.S., Trump talked about it in his speech. I think it was, where was he at this week? I forget. He was in Iowa. I don't know. He was talking somewhere. I think it was in Houston, maybe. He talked about how we have, for the first time in decades, we actually had a net out migration from the United States, not an immigration. And we've got to do that because we have 20 to 50 million illegals in our country. The 20 million Biden brought in, there were already 30 million before that, okay? So that's what we're facing. And as you'll see later in the podcast, it's costing us a fortune, and the left is using it to destroy our country. So it's good to see that it's having effect. Got 2 more stories here before we break for the half of the show. These are big court wins. U.S. Supreme Court appears sympathetic to Trump administration's asylum case. So this is a very interesting story. U.S. Supreme Court justices indicated sympathy on Tuesday toward Donald Trump's administration in its defense of the government's authority to turn away asylum seekers when officials deem the U.S.-Mexico border crossing too overburdened to handle additional claims. Kind of like, we've only got so many resources, and what was the left doing, right? The Howard Cleveland thing that Glenn Beck taught us about, right? Overwhelm the system. So what did they do during the Biden years? They just surged people to the border, and then the border didn't have the resources, and they just put up their hands and say, come on in. Trump saying, whoa, we're going to stop that. The legal dispute centers on a policy called metering that the Republican president's administration may seek to revive after it was dropped by Joe Biden in 2021. The policy allowed U.S. immigration officials to stop asylum seekers at the border and indefinitely decline to process their claims. Oh, we can't have that if we're the lefties, right? The Trump administration has appealed to lower courts finding that the policy violated federal law. The policy is separate from the sweeping ban on asylum at the border that Trump announced after returning to the presidency last year. That policy also faces ongoing legal challenges, but it looks like the Supreme Court is going to back this one. Under U.S. law, a migrant who, quote, arrives in the United States may apply for asylum and must be inspected by a federal immigration official. The narrow legal issue is the current case is whether asylum seekers who are stopped on the Mexican side of the border have arrived in the United States. Vivek Suri, the Justice Department lawyer who argued on behalf of the Trump administration to the Supreme Court, told the justices during the arguments, you can't arrive in the United States while you're still standing in Mexico. That should be the end of the case. Brilliant, simple, If we stop them in Mexico, right, on the other side of the border, you haven't arrived, we can say, I'm sorry, we're full today. Come back tomorrow. We don't have the resources. Love it, love it, love it. Here's a second court ruling that may be equally beneficial to us. Eighth Circuit blows open the federal power to detain illegal immigrants, not just at the border. That's the kicker, not just at the border. On Tuesday, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a ruling that dramatically expands the federal government's authority to detain illegal immigrants without bond, holding that even those arrested inside the United States, far from any port of entry, can be subject to mandatory detention. In Hera Oliva versus Bondi, the court adopted a broad interpretation of federal immigration law that effectively erases the long assumed, because the lefties just abuse the law. They just abuse the law every way they can, whether it's the EPA, whether it's the immigration, whatever. The law doesn't say anything like this, but they just did it anyway because they could make some kind of a phony case that it's what the law meant. So a long assumed distinction between illegal immigrants stopped at the border and those living in the interior. Joaquin Herrera Avila entered the United States illegally in 2006 and again in 2016, by the way. Okay, so he was arrested during a 2025 traffic stop and placed in removal proceedings where the Department of Homeland Security detained him without bond. An immigration judge denied his request for a bond hearing. He filed a habeas petition seeking a release hearing under the Immigration Nationality Act, and a district court granted him relief. However, the Eighth Circuit Court reversed the district court's decision, holding that any non-citizen present in the United States, without having been lawfully admitted, right? So they didn't get admitted, are subject to mandatory detention without bond. And the decision closely examines the statutory language and ultimately hinges on whether an applicant for admission is also an alien seeking admission. And the court said, no, they're not. Those things make a difference, folks. That's why we have net out migration. That's why we're winning this fight, right? We're winning this fight. Trump is winning. He's doing what he promised to do. Tom Homan is going to go down in history as one of the greatest American heroes of this age. What a job that guy's doing. And so you and I, have to support ICE. We have to support the House. Your House members, here's a direct ask. And for those of you new to the podcast, yeah, we talk a lot. We take action in defense of our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So here's a direct ask. You, today, need to write to every one of your House members and say, great job passing the DHS funding, and support them. That's what you got to do. And then you got to go after your senators and say, get back to work and do what the American people want. We're sick and tired. If this is a representative form of government and 85% of Americans want our borders secure, want terrorists from Iran tracked down in our country so they can't hurt us, want the SAVE Act so we have fair elections, and you won't vote for it, you need to be thrown out of office. The primaries are still coming. Maybe we need to not vote for these people. Maybe you need to make that clear. All right? So that's what we do on this podcast, and you need to take action because being an American isn't a spectator sport, is it? We're participants. We, the people, have to be involved or we don't have a republic. So either act or just become a slave. It's that simple. Either you're part of the solution, or you're part of the problem. Which are you? Every one of you have to ask yourself that today. And you need to decide to act, to defend this great nation and our Western civilization. Okay? All right. Going to take a short break. I hope you enjoyed the first half of the podcast. Got lots of good stuff in the second half of the podcast, so I hope that you'll stay tuned for that. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and we'll be back after these messages. The We the People Convention news and opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. What, something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. So if you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this, whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday. So if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday. And in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot. All right. And we're back, and we're glad you're with us. And, we appreciate all of you who donate to the We the People Convention. And you can do that, wethepeopleconvention.org. But we know that not everyone can donate. We know, expenses are up. Joe Biden, again, you can't blame Trump. Your friends want to blame Trump. The inflation that Biden did is like 20% inflation. It's still there. It's you can't get rid of that, right? You can lower gas prices, which you were doing, but that inflation is there. I know it's hurting you. I know what it costs to go out to eat. It's like crazy. You just can't believe it, right? Everybody can't donate. We got that. What can you do? Well, first of all, you can share this podcast. That's important. Why? Because the second thing you do is take action, like I asked before the break, to call your House members, write to them, and say thank you for passing the CR to fund DHS, okay? And then I asked you to confront your senators and tell them to get back to work. And the more people that you share this podcast with, the more people will get that message. The more people who will do that, the more effect we will have. It's all connected, okay? It's all connected. So If you can donate, donate. You certainly can watch this podcast, and you certainly can share it. And then you certainly can take action. That's how you and I protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay? All right. So I also want to remind you that we have our podcast chapters player on our podcast page where it takes till Sunday for the AI to process it. But basically, it takes every story in the podcast and creates a video link for that. So you can scroll down and just click on the story about the DHS funding, and it'll start the video right there. And then there's a link that you can send to people that starts right there. Okay? Use the tools we give you. Use our website. We have, as I said in that video, all the stories in the podcast are listed, so you can click and go to the original article to see the story, to read the rest of it. Because I'm just giving you the highlights. There's a lot more. Okay? All right. So let's get after it. There's so much more going on than just the war and the DHS situation. And this story, I think, is huge. I was really excited about this. The Supreme Court held a hearing, okay, and it was amazing how skeptical they were of the mail-in ballots coming after Election Day. It was awesome. And I'll play a video clip here in a second. Supreme Court looks poised to limit mail-in ballots, a possible win for Trump and America. Supreme Court could back a Republican effort to stop states from counting late-arriving mail-in ballots, a decision that would be a win for President Trump and would lead to stricter voting rules around the country. It would help end cheating, guys. That's what it would really do. Because in California, and I know we've got some great people in California who fought like heck in 2024, where they literally stole like 6 House seats. We would not be in the position we're in right now if they hadn't kept counting until they had enough votes, because that's what receiving ballots after the Election Day is really about. You can't cheat as well if you don't know how many votes you need. You got to say, wow, we're losing by 1,000 votes. Let's have 1,500 mail-in votes come in after Election Day. That's the truth. That's what's going on. During more than 2 hours of oral arguments on March 23rd, the court's conservative majority sounded skeptical of a Missouri allowing ballots cast by Election Day to be counted if they were received within 5 days after Election Day. Justice Sam Alito said not having a firm deadline raises many other questions, including how long a grace period can be and whether ballots have to be postmarked. You have a variety of line drawing programs, he told a Mississippi attorney, but 29 states could be affected by this. All right. So here's Harmeet Dhillion with some shocking information. She's in the Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Division, which is over election law. She's the one that's suing to get the states to give the federal government their voting rolls so they can be compared against the Social Security Administration records and the DHS naturalization records to make sure that people on your voter rolls are Americans. They won't do it. She's the one suing for that, okay? And for those of you who watch this podcast, you'll know We the People Convention, through your donations, we were funding Harmeet Dhillion back in the COVID days when she was fighting the California nuts and crazy people with COVID, and now she's in the DOJ doing great work. Watch this video. This gonna hurt your brain. Listen to this.
It's caused chaos now, and a lot of people feel uncertainty and a lack of confidence in the outcome of our elections because you see the results flip. You see certain numbers on Election Day, and then in some states like California, they can keep receiving these ballots for weeks after the election, and 8 states don't even require a postmark. And the Postal Service also tells us these days they don't postmark all the mail.
Harmeet, just really quick, you said some states don't require a postmark? I didn't even know that.
8 states. 8 states don't require a postmark. And the Postal Service itself says they no longer bother to postmark all the mail. So how do we know that these ballots were duly cast? And secondly, the rest of the world we condemn for being not as efficient and as committed to Republican or democracy form of government as we are. The rest of the world has election results on Election Day itself. Even countries that we consider to be not very civilized do that. We're one of those places where we're, I think, ignoring federal law. So the statutes in question before the court go back to 1845. And there was a vigorous discussion about the history of the Civil War when there were certain unusual procedures put into place to allow proxy voting and battlefield voting and all of that. And we can always have exceptions to our laws, of course. So, for example, there's a federal statute that specifically covers overseas voters, and that's one of the statutes that I administer here. It's called UOCAVA. So where the federal government creates certain special rules, that is not an issue. But where states are making up rules that make it looser and looser and looser, and we don't have an election day anymore, that's the problem.
That's the problem. Yeah. You think? No postmarks. So now these laws say anything postmarked before Election Day, we know in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, there were ballots that came in that were never folded into an envelope. The cheating is off the charts, kids. This is the reality of our world. The Democrats, the Marxists, the communists have gained the power they have over us and almost took over our country with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. Almost, except for your and my efforts, okay? It's all fraudulent. There's no there. That's why they're fighting so hard not to fund DHS. That's why they don't want to pass the SAVE Act, because they're cheating not a little bit, massively. And it was pretty clear from the judge's comments that Election Day means day. Alito said birthday is the day of your birth, not the day after, not 5 days after, not 3 weeks after. I think we're going to win this one. And here's why you need to win it. This is in California. Riverside County Sheriff investigates 2025 special election, citing discrepancies in the number of voters. So how is this possible? Listen to these numbers because it's just striking. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco has launched an investigation into a potential discrepancy in the number of ballots cast in last year's special election. On one hand, the Riverside County Registrar of Voters said the number of ballots counted by the machines numbered more than 657,000. Okay? But an independent investigation by a group of concerned citizens shows the number of handwritten logs filled out by various election officials and poll workers showed just 611,000 votes cast. There's a big difference between 657,000 and 611,000, right? I'm not saying anyone was lying or there's a series of mistakes, the sheriff said at a news conference. I'm just saying I don't know. We're not talking about 10. We're not even talking about 1,000. We're talking about the difference between having a perfect count and 45,800 vote difference. That's massive, he said. Sheriff investigators recently served a search warrant at the Registrar of Voters office, seized multiple boxes of ballots from the 2025 special election. The sheriff said a Superior Court judge recently ordered the appointment of a special master to supervise the sheriff's investigation as they count all the ballots. Uh-oh, that could be a problem in California. The purpose of the investigation is just as much to prove the election is accurate as it is to show otherwise. We won't know until we count all the ballots. Okay. At a recent Riverside County Board of Supervisors meeting, Register Art Tinoco stood by the machine count of the ballots, saying the handwritten logs were completed by people working long hours who might have made mistakes. 45,000 mistakes? These documents are completed by temporary employees that are out in the field collecting them and working at these sites, said Timko at the meeting. So those forms, again, may come back and the counts may be imprecise. Imprecise? How? What a misuse of that word, pal. How's that on an election when you're just not sure about 45,000 votes? Wow. So, and here's Chuck Schumer. I mentioned this when we're talking about, the DHS stuff. I'm never going to stop playing this video. You should never stop playing this video because here they are admitting that they cheat.
About voter registration. It allows ICE to kick tens of millions of people off the rolls, and they don't tell them until Election Day, and you show up and you say, you're not registered anymore. You're not registered here. You're not on the rolls.
Yeah. No, that's bullcrap. You just told us the truth, that there's tens of millions of illegals voting for Democrats. Illegals and dead people. Because all you got to do is have a name on the voter roll, and then they can manufacture the ballot. We just had James O'Keefe out in California pretending to be a homeless guy, getting paid to put false ballots together. Did an investigation. They're doing it all the time. It's a ecosystem. It's a criminal enterprise run by the Democrat Marxist Socialist Party to steal our elections. That's what's going on. So just remember that and keep playing that video for all your friends who say, oh, there's not any real cheating. It's a couple people here or there. Yeah, not even close, kids. In California, there may be 7 or 8 million alone illegal votes in California alone. There's no way they win the elections they win without cheating. They've been cheating for 50 years in California. It's a disgrace. And we let them. Now we're trying to stop them. Kudos to Harmeet, Dhillion. Kudos to the Supreme Court. Kudos to the Trump administration for fighting the fight. Okay, we usually do some international news. We did the war, certainly international news there, so there's a lot there. But here's some other important and interesting stories. This was disturbing. FBI announces Chinese suspects indicted for IED that was detonated at the Centom headquarters in Florida. This happened a little while ago. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has revealed that a brother and sister from China are indicted in connection with an improvised explosive device placed at the base that serves as the headquarters of the U.S. Central Command, which is currently executing the Iran operation. Okay? Let's see here. FBI Director Patel posted an announcement on X Thursday, March 26. An IED was placed at MacDill Air Force Base, home of CENTCOM. Brother and sister have now been indicted. One of the suspects is in a foreign and hostile country, however, so he cannot be arrested at present. Patel added one is in custody for accessory and evidence tampering. The primary suspect is charged with explosive offenses and is currently in China. Okay? So here they are. We've said this all along. They've got 300,000 college students, don't you know? And I'm going to talk about that in a second. That's going to be real interesting. All right? The Chinese. We had 30-some thousand come across the border, military-age men from China that Biden let in. And we keep waiting for these attacks. Well, that attack's pretty pathetic, okay? But the bottom line is it just proves that the Chinese are here and they can attack. FBI Tampa arrested Anne Mary Zhang, the sister, and charged her with accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence. If convicted, she faces a jail sentence of up to 30 years. Besides Anne Mary, her mother is also in custody, held by Immigration and Customs Enforcement after she reportedly confessed to investigators that her son said he was guilty of the IED plot. Fox News explained that the main suspect, the one believed to have planted the device, Alan Zhang, who fled the United States for Communist China, he's facing charges of attempted damage to government property by fire or explosion. Prosecutors allege that on March 11th, the day after the bomb was planted, the sibling attempted to cover their tracks, and then he fled to China, and we didn't stop him. So there you go. It's not our imagination. I've been telling you guys in this podcast for 16 years. China is the enemy. Everything going wrong in the United States, including the Democrat Marxist Party, is funded by the Communist Chinese, who do what? Take our stupid, giving of our manufacturing to them to become the big supplier of the United States, taking the billions and trillions of dollars we give them to do what? To fund the overthrow of our country, to bribe Hunter and Joe Biden, to bribe Nancy Pelosi, to bribe Mitch McConnell. Okay, it's all on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org. Okay, the Chinese have been conducting war against us your and my whole lifetime, and I'm 70 years old, and Trump is the first one to realize it and is going after them. Okay, so that's the bottom line. That's what's going on here, and so this story will just make you understand how deep this is and how little we've done. The people you and I pay lots of money to defend our country. How does this happen? California school district allegedly gave fraudulent diplomas to Chinese students to help them enter U.S. colleges. Oh, really? Listen to this story. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco blasts school district over China diploma scandal. An extensive audit revealed a California school district allegedly issued diplomas to students in China in addition to potentially unlawful financial practices associated with the district's international program. Yeah, what are unlawful financial practices? They got bribes. They got money to give high school diplomas from a U.S. school district to kids in China who then applied to go to U.S. colleges and got accepted so they could spy on the United States, and we let them. The Val Verde Unified School District in Riverside, California, was audited by the county superintendent of schools in a more than 1,000-page review that alleged that they gave unauthorized diplomas to non-resident Chinese students at the district's sister school, Pegasus California School, in Qingdao, China. So they set up a sister school in China, gave U.S. diplomas to Chinese students at that school who then came to the United States. Our audit commissioned by Dr. Gomez raises serious concerns about academic integrity, taxpayer fraud, and much may even implicate national security. Larson LLP partner Stephen G. Larson told Fox News Digital, "We found that a California public school district improperly issued diplomas to students in China, and the broader record shows that those California credentials may have been used to create false legitimacy for students seeking entry into U.S. universities." But the CIA, the FBI, the other NSA, the other U.S. spy agencies, oh, they didn't stop it. Did they know about it? Did they care? Did they approve of it? Because half of them are commies in our government anyway, right? That's the reality. Then this story, not going to surprise any of you guys watching this podcast, but it's a blockbuster nonetheless, because to most of America, everything we've told them in the Tea Party movement for 16 years was just a conspiracy theory, except we were right about everything. And this is another thing we were right about. U.S. intercepted Ukraine government messages discussing plot to route money to Biden re-election. Here it is, kids. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard recently learned of the intercepts and asked the U.S. Agency for International Development officials to scour for records to see if the plot actually was carried out and whether a criminal referral should be made to the FBI. Gabbard's team has not found substantial evidence that the intercepted allegations were thoroughly investigated by the Biden administration. Oh yeah, the Biden administration's FBI, who illegally spied on Trump, created all the lawfare and stuff, falsely set up charges against Trump. They're going to investigate the fact that Ukraine's government, who wants Biden to stay in office so they can keep robbing us blind, was sending our taxpayer dollars that we gave to Ukraine for their war effort back to the Biden campaign. Oh, they're going to investigate that, aren't they? Yeah. The declassified report is a summary of raw intercepts from U.S. spy agencies in late 2022 concerning the alleged plot, and officials who have reviewed the files said there seems to be a lack of curiosity to investigate. The Ukraine government and unspecified U.S. government personnel, through U.S. aid in Kiev, reportedly developed a plan that would provide hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. tax dollars to fund an infrastructure project for Ukraine that would be used as a cover to send approximately 90% of the funds allocated to the DNC to fund Joe Biden's election campaign, the declassified summary of the intercept stated. Yeah. How about if the people at the DNC are prosecuted for this? That's misuse of taxpayer dollars. How about, the USAID people? How about the USAID people in Kiev? Are they going to be arrested, Pam Bondi? When does anybody get held accountable for? Hundreds of millions of dollars to the Biden campaign. Oh, but nothing to see here. Oh, no, nothing to see here. There was no cheating. Come on, Tom. Come on, you're a conspiracy theorist. So while there's that kind of news, the other news I want to share with you is that it's our anti-immigration efforts here are not alone. It's starting to spread to Europe. And there were big things this week that happened that you're never going to get coverage of because in your news, they don't even care. We are fighting the war against global communism and global Islam, right? Just like World War II. We had to defeat the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese, and then we could defeat the commies, right? Right? The Soviet Union. Now, we've got to defeat the Marxists because the left, the Democrat Party, is run by communists. There are no Democrats, and they have been trying to destroy our country, which I will give you more evidence of as we go through this podcast, all right? But there's also the Islamification of the United States through Mondami in New York and all the things that are happening here, but it's also in Europe. And Europe is this close to falling. They're almost done. But because Donald Trump and Marco Rubio went to Europe and said, wake up, you're being destroyed. You've got to close your borders. You've got to export these people who will not assimilate. They're here to conquer you. Wake up. They finally are. Here's a picture of breaking. The far-right Danish People's Party has quadrupled their vote share in today's general election in Denmark, despite polling lowly. They advocate for closing Denmark's borders, limiting asylum, and deporting refugees. The Danish people want their country back. Okay? That's important. This is even more important because it's Germany. Breaking, Germany's right-wing anti-Islamic migration party just surged in tonight's West German state elections, making a surprising 11-point gain. AfD has nearly doubled its seats from just a few years ago. Take your country back from the third world. That's what has to happen. That's what we've got to do here, okay? Why do we have to do it here? This is an interesting video about about how the Marxist left used a strategy to bring in illegals and then raid our treasury to fund their campaigns, okay? You got to see this. This is what's really going on, and this will be our theme going into the end of the podcast where I've got an important statement.
A new study finds that 61% of illegal immigrant households collect some sort of welfare, which is almost double the rate of people born in the United States. The Washington Times reports that children have a significant role in getting that aid. Let's bring in the author of that article, Washington Times political editor Stephen Dinan. Stephen, great to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us. So break this down for us. How is it that children play this role in helping households led by illegal immigrants to get 61% of which get some kind of welfare?
Yeah, you think that generally there's this sense that illegal immigrants aren't eligible for welfare benefits. And by and large, that's true. There are some exceptions, pregnant women, and there are actually some tax credits that can go to illegal immigrants who are here but who have work permits. But most of that welfare use is coming to their U.S.-born children to illegal immigrant-headed households. So you have a parent or two parents who are here illegally, but they have children who are born here, and that's very common, and those are U.S. citizen children. They're entitled to welfare, all sorts of benefits, food, school lunch programs, food stamps, even housing assistance can go to those U.S. citizen children, and so of course that floats the whole family. So 61% of these families, as you said, use at least one welfare benefit, and the welfare use is pretty consistent across those programs I just talked about. Those kids, Medicaid is another big one. It's called the Women, Infant, and Children program, and they're eligible for that as well. So it's the children that are the sort of the access point here. Yeah, and the real interesting thing here is that it's not that the immigrant families don't work as hard or that they aren't taking jobs. In fact, the studies generally show that they work at a higher rate than the native-born population. The issue is that most immigrants, or immigrants as a whole, and illegal immigrants in particular, they just are less educated, less skilled. The profile of the illegal immigrant, average illegal immigrant coming, is less skilled, and therefore they're going to need more assistance. They earn less and end up needing more assistance to live and remain here in the U.S.
Okay, so there you have it. This is the anchor baby thing that Trump is fighting, this birthright citizenship nonsense. So what happens is the left lets illegals in through hook or by crook. They were flying them in, right? Biden was flying them in. They were letting them in through the borders, right? And then they come here and they start having babies. Well, according to the left, which is not in the Constitution, and that's going to be decided this June, this birthright citizenship thing, they then claim, well, my baby's a U.S. citizen. They get a Social Security card, and the baby gets welfare. Okay? This is the problem. This is a designed program to steal your hard-earned money. That's what you got to start understanding. And that's why I keep telling you guys, fraud is going to be a big issue in this November's election because it affects all of us equally. Doesn't matter what your political party is. They keep telling you to work harder and pay more taxes to be compassionate for all these people that need our help. They're stealing us blind, and it's intentional. And that story tells you that. Speaking of stealing blind and intentional, yeah, how bad was the Black Lives Matter stuff, right? We in this movement knew this was a scam from the beginning, okay? Black Lives activists named Bostonian of the Year ordered to pay back over $200,000 in stolen funds, okay? Yeah. How many stories have we had like this about these Black Lives Matter activists having stolen millions of dollars? Monica Cannon Grant, a Black Lives Matter activist who was named Bostonian of the Year by the Boston Globe, you fools. The Boston Globe, you're a bunch of woke joke fools. I hope your paper's going under. I hope nobody in Boston buys that rag anymore. Was ordered to pay back every dime she stole for her nonprofit, unemployment benefits, and other fraudulent practices, amounting to almost $225,000. U.S. District Judge Ann Kelly sentenced Cannon Grant. Now get this. She stole $225,000, pretending to help black people as a black person. So isn't that a racial crime? Shouldn't she be held to an even higher standard? Oh, no. The court granted her 4 years probation, 6 months of home detention, and 100 hours of community service. That's nothing. That's garbage. Federal prosecutors recommended 18 months in prison. Although Cannon Grant dodged time behind bars, she must return all the money she managed to steal. Oh, right. So how much is her life disrupted? Cannon Grant founded Violence in Boston, Inc. in 2017, coordinated massive protests and marches following the death of George Floyd, and facilitated other progressive social campaigns. She is what the Marxists train. She's a thief. She was trained to steal your money. Okay? And fortunately, most of the money she stole was from dumbass lefties. Okay? But nonetheless, that's not enough of a penalty. Not enough of a penalty in any way, shape, or form from my view. Okay? This story, has been in the it was getting news and then it kind of disappeared. But like everything else, it's a cesspool. Exclusive. Top Trump official sheds light on mess lying under the hood of illegal trucking crisis. All right? Derek Barr knew cleaning up the trucking industry would be a big job when President Trump gave him the task, having spent years cracking down on commercial drivers for the Florida Highway Patrol. So this officer, has been working on this. Yet even Barr was surprised when he took the reins of the federal agency that manages the trucking industry, a crucial facet of the country's economy currently beleaguered with illegal immigrant drivers who can't speak English, shady companies skirting enforcement regulations, and hundreds of trucking schools handing out licenses like candy. Don't get us wrong. We've always had problems, Barr, who has been heading the Transportation Department's Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration since its confirmation in October. We have seen an increase in the non-domicile CDL licenses, and we've also seen an increase in what we believe are these chameleon carriers. This is more than what I thought, and do not ever remember anything like this before. It's just because these people can't read even our signs. They're killing American citizens on our highways. And places like California and New York don't care. They don't care that they're killing Americans. Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer and all the Democrats don't care. What did Jeffries said? Our goal of the DH shutdown is to hurt people hurt Americans so that they will make the Republicans cave to our demands to allow us to keep importing illegals and rigging your elections. That's their strategy. The Chicago murder of the college girl this week by an illegal alien, and the mayor of Chicago wants to blame the girl for getting shot in the head. They don't want to stop it. How do you destroy a society? You take an organized society and you create chaos. That's how you destroy it. So if you just keep letting, and I think the guy that shot that girl had been arrested like 20 times. You just keep letting them out of jail. You let them prey on innocent people to make them afraid. That's what the left is doing. That's their goal, to destroy America. Our goal is to destroy them. And we're going to do it. And we're going to do it big time this year in the November elections. Because these people can't do 10% of what they've been doing if we take them out of the prosecutor's office, out of the mayor's office, out of the city council offices. If we stop illegals from voting, then the real citizens get the vote and their vote counts. That's what we're working for. So here was a big thing that happened in Texas, and it's got to happen in your state. Development of potential Sharia city in Kaufman County ends following investigation by Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's running for Senate in Texas. Following an investigation by Attorney General Ken Paxton, plans for the development of potentially unlawful Sharia city community in Kaufman County have ended. In early February 2026, residents raised concerns about a foreign-based development company's plans to purchase thousands of acres near Kaufman, Texas. Developers plan to create a sustainable city with potential to house as many as 20,000 foreign nationals, alarmed the surrounding community. Not only could the influx of tens of thousands of foreign nationals into rural Texas pose national security risks, but residents also feared the strain that such a development could place on local water supply. On February 9th, Attorney General Paxton announced his office's investigation into potentially unlawful Sharia city development, and part of the investigation were sent to developers, including a U.S. subsidiary of a Dubai-based development company called SEE Holdings. So here's Dubai funding this Sharia city in the United States. Congressman Lance Gooden has now confirmed that developers decided to end their proposed plans in Kaufman County. Because of the risk posed by the infiltration of Sharia law into Texas, my office will work tirelessly to end any illegal schemes that seem to subvert the Constitution and disrupt the American way of life. I am glad to see the developers of this Sharia city in Kaufman have ceased their operations following my office's investigation. Folks, there's billions of dollars from radical Muslims globally to do here what they're doing in England, what they're doing in France, in Norway, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Germany. I had an article I was going to use for the podcast that says in Europe, there are 1,000 quote-unquote no-go zones where the police in France or Germany will not send officers in because the Islamists govern those no-go zones. What are you doing besides committing cultural suicide and national suicide? We're not going to commit national suicide here. We're going to kick Sharia to the curb. It's not a religion. It's a militant government of tyranny. And that's why the communists and the radical Muslim, the red-green axis exists. Congratulations to Ken Paxton and those guys for putting their hammer down, saying you ain't doing this. Good job. All right, let's try to get onto some more positive things here. This was good. Toyota announces $1 billion investment in U.S. plants in the United States. Toyota announced a $1 billion investment across Kentucky and Indiana for operations in a March 23rd statement. The Japanese automaker announced the investment as it celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Kentucky plant, which is also Toyota's largest manufacturing plant in the world, assembling about 550,000 vehicles and 600,000 engines a year and employing close to 10,000 full-time American workers in Kentucky. The $1 billion is part of a $10 billion the company had earlier committed to invest in the United States over the next 5 years. Toyota's investment in the United States is for the long term, tied to our philosophy of building where we sell and buying where we build, said Mark Templin, Chief Operating Officer of Toyota Motors North America. We have created a tremendous value chain for nearly 70 years. Our teams have contributed to world-class design, engineering, and assembly of more than 35 million cars and trucks for our customers in the United States. About $800 million will be invested in Kentucky, and the rest will be invested in Indiana. Congratulations. That's awesome. That's what we need to see. This was another thing we need to see. U.S. company produces critical rare earth materials domestically first in decades. This is key to our national security. Mining company Energy Fuels announced March 25th that it successfully produced its first kilogram of terbium, T-E-R-B-I-U-M, oxide at its Utah project, becoming the first U.S. company to produce the compound domestically in decades. The company reported achieved a purity of 99.9% of the terbium oxide, a sought-after rare earth compound needed for batteries and electronics, at its White Mesa mill using monetized ore sources in the United States. This success proves we can process and produce high-quality heavy rare earth oxides economically and at scale in the U.S. North America will soon have a reliable and secure U.S. source of these vital critical materials, ensuring availability for high-performance magnets and defense technology. Trump said we got to get after it. Here again, proof positive. I get these emails from some of our members talking about, Trump isn't doing anything. Literally, people write to me and say, Trump isn't doing anything. They don't see all the things that he is doing. This doesn't happen without Donald Trump. We are at grave risk if this doesn't happen. Connect the dots, okay? Connect the dots. This lady connected the dots, and boy, it took long enough, but sure glad to see it. International Olympic Committee bans male athletes from women's sports. Wow, that's about time. The International Olympic Committee is barring men athletes from competing against women at the Olympics, beginning with the 2028 Summer Games set to take place in Los Angeles. IOC President Christy Coventry, a decorated former Olympic swimmer from Zimbabwe, announced the ban Thursday after promising to protect the integrity of women's sports leading up to her election. She's the first woman, by the way, to lead the International Olympic Committee. The policy that we have announced is based on science and has been led by medical experts with the best interests of the athletes at heart. The scientific evidence is very clear. Male chromosomes give performance advantages in sports that rely on strength, power, or endurance, she said in a video. At the Olympic Games, even the smallest margins can be the difference between victory and defeat. So it's absolutely clear that it would not be fair for biological males to compete in female category. In addition, in some sports, it would not be safe. The announcement marks the culmination of the IOC's administrative review as it approaches of its approach to the female athlete category started in September 24. The IOC launched a working group to examine the scientific evidence, the medical evidence, and it's obvious. It's obvious. And yet some on the left are still pushing back. Okay? And so basically, women will be required to take a one-time genetics test in order to be eligible to compete. And if your chromosomes say you're a guy, you're a guy. No matter what your external look is, it doesn't matter because that chromosomes decide what your body is like, and it will give you unfair advantage. You got to love it. You got to love it. This was a story, again, you're not picking up, unless you routinely go to Just the News. I tell you, John Solomon at Just the News is our New York Times. The left and the deep state leaks everything to the New York Times and the Washington Post. It looks to me like the Trump administration is leaking everything to John Solomon. So all these, the story about Harmeet, about Pam Bondi and Tulsi Gabbard, getting the documents about, the Obama, or the Biden campaign getting money from Ukraine to win re-election. That went to John Solomon and nobody else. Okay. I'm just making the case. So we're leaking to him. So you're going to find out stuff at Just the News. Here's another story that it came out. Okay. Big freaking deal. Trump axes Biden's censorship machine in unprecedented consent decree. So what is this about? It's about the Biden administration censoring everything, right? About, the government going to Facebook and Twitter and saying, you can't put that COVID story on. And they didn't. And that's being taken apart by Trump. And this order kind of makes that permanent, okay? Nearly 2 years after the Supreme Court killed free speech and the telling of future National Institute of Health Director Jay Bhattacharya by letting the Biden administration resume pressuring tech platforms to censor disfavored narratives on COVID-19, elections, and Hunter Biden, the Trump administration has made the plaintiff's wildest dreams come true. U.S. District Judge Terry Doherty, who imposed a sweeping preliminary injunction on the feds before the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals narrowed it, and SCOTUS lifted it for lack of legal standing, approved a consent decree Wednesday that he will oversee for the next 10 years. The resolution came more than a year into the Trump administration's return to power, which started with President Trump's day one executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America, which Doherty quotes at length in his order introduction. Louisiana Attorney General told Just the News, this was the first consent decree involving First Amendment and social media issues. He called it a big freaking deal that the federal government signed on, which requires a lot of institutional buy-in, because this is new ground for everyone involved. With no modern case law to guide discussions on resolution of censorship, the agreement was the product of extensive deliberation between and among the parties and called it cutting edge. So they have basically now, the federal government has signed a consent decree that basically prohibits the government from censoring the American people, which they claimed they weren't doing. Remember? They said, oh, these were merely suggestions, and Facebook and those people just did it because they wanted to, and Facebook and those guys said, no, they were going to hurt us. This breaks that down. That's a big deal and a long time coming, and will help us protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity in the future. Again, doesn't happen without Trump's executive order and without us winning the 24 election and fighting. This is the benefits. These are the fruits of your and my labors, okay? We are winning. It's just sometimes covered up by all the other news that, is the latest fight we have to fight. I bring this to you so you can see we are winning. And speaking of winning, this was huge. This is the decision we've been praying for. Jury finds social media companies guilty of harming kids. YouTube and Meta were found guilty in this landmark California trial this week about logarithms and addicting kids to social media to their detriment. A California jury in a landmark verdict with massive implications for the tech industry Wednesday found Meta and YouTube negligent for designing addictive social media platforms that harmed a child. After more than a week of deliberation, jurors decided in favor of the plaintiff, a now 20-year-old California woman identified as KGM in Los Angeles Superior Court, concluding that potent design features of platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook fueled her nonstop use as a teenager, exacerbating her depression and suicidal inclinations. The jury ordered Meta and YouTube to pay her $3 million in compensatory damages, with Meta assigned 70% of the responsibility, YouTube the rest. 10 jurors voted in favor of the plaintiffs, while 2 voted in favor of the defense. It is the first time a major social media company has been found liable by a U.S. jury for creating addictive products. The verdict came after a week-long trial that featured blockbuster testimony from top corporate executives, including Meta's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. The verdict comes on the heels of another ruling Tuesday in New Mexico, where a jury found Meta was liable for endangering children and misleading the public about the safety of its platforms. In that case, Meta must pay $375 million in civil penalties. Today's verdict is a referendum from a jury to an entire industry that accountability has arrived, the plaintiff's lawyers said. Juries also found Meta and YouTube should pay punitive damages, and that amount has not yet been set. Okay? So what's going to happen? The jury trial is a bellwether for hundreds of similar cases brought by more than 1,600 plaintiffs, ranging from California school districts that blame platforms for rampant student mental health issues to families that accuse social media platforms of harming their kids. Social media companies Snap, TikTok settled with the plaintiff days before the event went to trial. They were not also named in this. At the federal level, more than 235 plaintiffs are suing Meta, Snap, TikTok, and Google on similar grounds. This is the break we needed. Now, here's what's important. They did this in a very unique way. We've talked about Section 230, which basically protects the tech companies from the same liability that any other business in our society has. They're excluded from that, from Section 230, because they're not responsible for anything that's posted on their sites by users. What this case did is they sued them in a product defect litigation. They said it wasn't that there was the stuff that was posted that caused the harm. It was you intentionally designed your software to addict these children, and that's why you're legally liable. And it worked. What does this mean? This means that our efforts to ban children under 16 from using social media is going to happen, because now the tech companies are going to be liable for trillions of dollars in damages. This means they're going to have to change their algorithms, which is better for all of us, including adults, because they work on us too. Okay? This is a big deal. Now, again, some of you are against this. Some of you don't want age verification. I have a right to privacy on the internet. No, you don't. And you don't have it even if you think you do. Okay? This is about protecting our children, which is about protecting our nation. Because what has happened is we have destroyed a whole generation of young people who don't know how to talk to each other, who don't have social skills, who sit at a table and instead of talking to the kids next to them, text them. They can't work in our society. We've handicapped them forever because during their developmental years, we have let these tech companies change the neuron development in their brains. If you don't believe me, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org. Go to this story. Jury finds social media companies guilty. And in that story, I link to the other stories that gives you all the videos, that give you all the evidence that this is real harm to our kids that we let go way too long. Way too long. Besides abortion, this is the biggest crime against our children that our nation has committed. It's a disgrace. You need to support this to the hilt. You need to demand that your schools prohibit phones. You need to demand that your states outlaw the use of social media until you're 16. And you need to sue the hell out of these companies to try to get in on the damage that was done to your children or grandchildren. Big deal. Big deal. Really important. Okay, this was important on a personal level. Many of you know that we have a personal relationship with General Mike Flynn. The DOJ agrees to $1.2 million settlement with Flynn as the Russia case unravels. It's nowhere near enough money. We love Mike Flynn. Those of you who've been a part of our organization forever know that we were a state organization in Ohio until the 2020 election was stolen. Then, with your money and your donations, this organization took out a full-page ad in the Washington Times asking President Trump to declare temporary limited martial law to hold a recount of the federal election that was stolen in 2020 before the Congress could verify the results. We put out that ad, and General Flynn was responsible for promoting that, and we became a national organization on that day. We had 1 million people come to our website that day that we ran that ad asking Trump to declare temporary limited martial law to have a revote of the federal elections in all 50 states where you had to show up in person and use a photo ID to vote. We wish he would have done that. It didn't happen. It wasn't God's plan, and I'll have something to say about that in a couple stories here. But let me just say that at least Mike Flynn has gotten something, okay? The Justice Department has agreed to pay former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn about $1.2 million to settle his lawsuit over the Russiagate prosecution that followed him out of office, closing out a case that went from guilty plea to dismissal to pardon and now a federal payout. The settlement resolves Flynn's lawsuit filed in 2023, seeking at least $50 million in damages, and he deserved every dollar of that. The agreement closes that case without a trial, years after criminal charges against him were dropped and later pardoned. The underlying case goes back to 2017 when Flynn was interviewed by the FBI about his contacts with the Russian ambassador, and then they drove him out of the Trump administration because Flynn knew what the deep state was doing and they had to take him out. And he was the first one that they took out. Jim Comey set a trap and illegally took him out. We still got to get Comey. Basically, Flynn said, Flynn said, nothing can fully compensate for the hell that my family and I have endured over these many years. They lost their home. They had to sell their house. Okay? They went after, he pled guilty. You know why he pled guilty? Because Comey and those guys said, if you don't plead guilty, we're going after your son. That's why he pled guilty. That's the kind of extortion that the Obama, Biden, FBI, criminal FBI and DOJ was doing to Mike Flynn. He said, the relentless attacks, the destruction of reputations, the financial ruin, and the profound personal toll inflicted upon all of us. No amount of money or formal resolution can erase the pain caused by a prosecution that should never have been brought. Here, General Flynn. Thank goodness you got something, okay? Hopefully you can buy yourself a nice house, but it's nowhere near enough. You talk about a true patriot who then didn't run away and hide. He's still fighting today. He's fighting like crazy. Follow General Flynn on X. You'll see he's out every day fighting against the deep state and the communists and for our country. He's a real patriot, and we're just really glad that happened. So I'm going to conclude the podcast with an important rant. Trump posted this on X, and it kind of set me off. He put a True Social thing out saying, now with the death of Iran, the greatest enemy America has is the radical left, highly incompetent Democrat Party. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay? And I said, he finally gets it. We wish he would have listened to the Tea Party when we elected him in 2016. We knew all of this. That was not God's will. So President Trump had to spend 4 years in the political desert to find the truth. This is the year we win the war against the communist, Marxist, radical left who took over the Democratic Party and nearly destroyed our great nation. Pass the SAVE Act, clean the voter rules, rule the radical congressional districts unconstitutional, defund the NGOs that stole our money to fund the commies, arrest and prosecute our communists, the communists and their sympathizers, including major political figures in both parties. Win this war this fall. Make the Dem Party go the way of the Whigs. Okay? Now, Trump does finally get it, I think. We told him. Remember when he said Bill and Hillary Clinton were good people? When he said I wasn't going to investigate her, and then she went on to destroy him, okay, and nearly destroy our country. He was naive. I don't think he's naive now. He certainly is fighting them. He certainly understands who the enemy is, particularly thanks to Stephen Miller and some of the rest of his team. We are at war. We are in a hot civil war. Right now, Charlie Kirk was killed in that war. The lefty demonstrators who were shot and killed by ICE were killed in this war. We're in a civil war, and it's nowhere near over. And the left will burn this country to the ground if we let them. They will burn this country to the ground. I don't know if we can get through this without major riots. You need to know that. You need to know you might have to fight for your country physically, literally, with your gun. So here's the truth that you all have to understand, that I have to understand, that I didn't want to be the truth. But I said to you earlier in the podcast, and I'm going to play a clip for Stephen Miller because J.D. Vance had a fraud event this week, okay? Here's the truth. We stopped being the United States of America with Woodrow Wilson. When you look at what the federal government should do, okay, just go and take a look under the Constitution. What should the federal government do? In practical terms, the federal government handles defense, foreign relations, interstate commerce, currency, immigration, federal courts, and nationwide rules. Okay? What are we doing? We're doing all 10 times that. Why? Because it was a plan to overthrow the government. About 1/4 to 1/3 of the $6.2 trillion of our budget goes for those things I just mentioned. All the rest of it goes for things the federal government has no business doing. Our federal budget should be $2 trillion, $1 trillion for defense and $1 trillion for everything else. Why isn't it? Well, here's the truth. What the commies figured out is that if they could infiltrate the government and then use their propaganda to do what? To start all these social programs, right? Oh, you got to help these people, right? It started with Social Security, right? Which is a scam. We would all be better off. We're on Social Security. I never wanted to be on Social Security. If I had invested the money that I paid into Social Security when I was working, I wouldn't need Social Security. All right? It's a way to enslave you. So what happened? What happened? What percentage of our people are on government assistance? You saw the numbers from the illegals, but it's like 50% are dependent on the government. That's not capitalism. That's socialism. So here's what they did. They kept telling you and I, damn it, you got to work harder. You got to pay more taxes to get, if you want that nice house and that, camping trip and, you want your kids to go to a good school, work harder and then give us 50% of your money. And we'll take care of the poor and the widows and we'll take care of the minorities who we've, racially discriminated against. And we'll take care of everybody. It's all a freaking lie. Here's the truth. The people who are getting these benefits that you and I have worked our whole lives to pay don't deserve them. They're not even qualified. No one even checks to see if they're qualified. Why did the Somalis, why were they able to steal $9 billion from Minnesota? Because it was set up for them to steal it. That's how the Marxists took our country, stole us blind. The $38 trillion of debt we have as a nation was stolen by the Marxists to destroy America and to destroy Western civilization. That's a fact. If we're going to be a country again, we need to defund almost all of these social programs. And who's going to do that? The Senate? Congress? They didn't cut anything. Folks, we're sending, I believe it's $50 million a month to the Taliban in Afghanistan. Really? Really? So you think I'm a little unhinged here? Okay. Here's Stephen Miller at the fraud summit. Here's what he had to say.
Important for Americans to understand about how pervasive and widespread the fraud is that all of our systems were set up and established for a high-trust society. I think that most citizens probably assume that there's some verification process that takes place for the receipt of most federal benefits. The reality is that there is not. This is particularly true in blue states, willfully true in blue states, in which all of these programs are operated entirely on the honor system. No verification takes place before individuals are enrolled in or receive these benefits. So as a simple example, if you're a Somali refugee living in Minnesota, you could lie about how many children you have. You could lie about what your immigration status is. You could lie about your marital status. You could lie about child care. You could lie about disability. You could lie about all these things and many more. And nobody in the state of Minnesota would validate any of these facts before writing you a check. We at the federal government are simply sent a bill from the state of Minnesota for the cost of providing these services in the aggregate. So to take the food stamp program as an example, SNAP, and that of course is administered by Secretary Mullins, we do not know the names of any SNAP recipient in the state of Minnesota. We just get a blank check. We have asked the state repeatedly and tried to compel the state unsuccessfully to turn over their SNAP enrollment rolls so we could ascertain such basic facts as, are these people even legally eligible to receive these benefits? And the state has refused, absolutely categorically refused. And in fact, the state has spent millions of dollars in court for the singular purpose of trying to prevent the state from ascertaining the identity of a single SNAP recipient in the entire state of Minnesota.
How's that? How's that? And then we have congressmen remember the first shutdown, which was over Obamacare benefits? We had congressmen saying, well, we have members of our committees who are in charge of making sure that there's no fraud. Folks, not only is there fraud, that's all there is. We are being robbed blind. We shouldn't have to even pay income taxes because you could fund the federal government the $2 trillion without us paying a dime in income taxes. It's all being stolen, all of it. And so now the Trump administration has this fraud task force, but guess what? Remember, going back now, for you guys who watch all the time, I talked about Trump is fighting this fight, okay, through the Office of Business and Management, right? Russ Vought, who's saying, the president should be able to say, you, Congress, allocated this money, but we don't need it, and so we're not going to spend it. And that is going to the Supreme Court. If we don't win that case, how is Trump going to then say, guess what? You give us all the voter rolls. No, you give us all the welfare rolls, all the SNAP rolls, and we're going to verify these individuals' qualifications for this. You're making so little money. You've got so many kids. It is an autistic kid, whatever. Or you don't get any money. If we don't do that, we're done because we're funding the enemy. We might as well be sending Iran intercontinental ballistic missiles so they can hit the United States. That's how stupid this is. It's got to stop. Can J.D. Vance and the Trump administration stop it? We need that Supreme Court ruling. And then if they stopped it, what you're going to find out is you're going to be richer than ever. Your kids are going to be better off. Your community is going to be better off when people have to do what you do every day. Work to get ahead, earn a living, not live off the government. That's a fact. That's what we've got to do to make America great again. And so I'm going to play this last video to close the podcast because I played Chuck Schumer saying, 20 million people will be taken off the voter rolls if you check their legal status. And then this clown, Hakeem Jeffries, said it all. Here you go.
But one of those demands is keep ICE out of sensitive locations. And we've defined that as schools, houses of worship, hospitals, and polling sites. We want an explicit prohibition that ICE can go nowhere near any polling sites in the United States of America. It's one of our demands. We're not going to bend on it.
Yeah. Hakeem, thanks. You guys, that video will be on our podcast page so you can download it and you can share it, and you share it all the time. Because would you be bothered if ICE was at your polling location? I wouldn't. What does that mean to me? Yeah. Why is he saying that, folks? He's literally giving us a campaign commercial. They use illegals to steal your vote. Remember, every illegal who votes takes away your vote. right? Your vote doesn't count if their side gets one and your side gets one, because they shouldn't have a right to vote. They shouldn't be voting. Hakeem Jeffries just said, we're not going to bend on this. We're never going to let ICE be at the polling locations, which tells me that Donald Trump needs to make sure ICE at the polling locations, no matter what. If they don't fund ICE for the rest of this year, this November, you and I are going to be demanding. I want ICE all over every polling location. That's what I want to see. We need to get our country back. Our country's in sad shape. And it's going to be really scary, because as you take away these tools, the left has nothing but violence left. Nothing. And when they come with weapons to take our country, what are you going to do? Are you going to defend our country like our forefathers did? Or are you going to let them take it? Because that's the question you're going to have to answer. That's where we're going. We're in a hot civil war. And quite frankly, I think we're in World War III as well, simultaneously. That's serious stuff. Okay, so I'll wrap up the podcast. Make sure you tell people about this podcast. And if you have questions, comments, stories we didn't cover that we should cover, send them to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. Please be sure to sign up to get our text messages and our emails and share those with other people. When we send you a text message, don't just click on the link and go to the story. Share it with people in your circle. Expand the circle so that we have more people helping us protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay? All right. We're going to wrap up the podcast for this week. I hope you got a lot out of it, and I thank you for joining. I hope you have a good week. Easter's coming. The weather is up and down. We're 70 degrees and 30 degrees. Great time to get sick. Take your zinc and vitamin C. Try to stay healthy. Okay? Have a good week. The baseball season started. I'm excited about that. The NCAA tournament's been fun. So you got to still live your life, but you still got to remember what's really going on and what your priorities are. And you still got to do your job. And that job is to protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay? All right. We're going to wrap it up. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. We'll see you next week.
Can you see
Let me read for those of you who just watch the audio. I put this up on the video every week. It's a statement from Winston Churchill. It says, if you will not fight for right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory is sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory because it is better to perish than to live as a slave. I read that. I put that up every week because I think that's the truth. We can fight and win when it's not too costly right now. We may be in a position where we're going to have to fight where the odds are against us. But the bottom line is, you got to be willing to fight. Freedom's not free. God bless you.